when something as horrific and violent as this happens, is that it's easy to sort of give in to the fear. And, I felt it too. Like, we all feel it. We're just like, oh God, and to sort of hide or hide away, or, reach for easy answers. And unfortunately, there aren't, aside from obviously, this kind of violence is deplorable and completely unjustifiable in any capacity. Um, but I think it's about asking ourselves, like, what kind of world do we want to build? How do we face up to this moment and reach for those who we want to be in movement with and in relationship, and hug them close to us and hold them close to us, and understand that, through this darkness, we will find our way back both to each other, but also to building a world where we never have to go through this kind of thing again, where no one has to go through this kind of thing again.
Welcome back to War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. My guest today is Em Hilton. She is a Jewish writer and activist based in London, the International Policy Director at Diaspora Alliance, a co-founder of Na'amud, British Jews Against Occupation, and sits on the steering committee for the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. So in addition to her extensive experience organizing in the UK and in Israel-Palestine, we're actually here to talk about Australia. She grew up a 10-minute drive from Bondi Beach in Sydney, the site of the devastating anti-Semitic terror attack that happened the first night of Hanukkah. And Em wrote an incredibly important piece for Plus 972 magazine called "After the Bondi Massacre, We Don't Have the Luxury to Grieve Silently." So, Em, welcome. What has your grief looked like these past 2-3 days?
Well, thank you for having me, Orli. It's really great to be here. Yeah, I've sort of been talking about the attack as shattering. I feel like it's really shattered both obviously the Jewish community, but also I think there is, in some ways, there is a bit of an innocence of life, or life in Australia. It does feel a little bit untouched by sort of the broader, sort of sometimes the challenges or the crises that the world is facing. I think that's what I really felt like growing up, obviously with a huge amount of privilege in Australia. But, I think when I think about Bondi Beach, it was my childhood. It was, going to bar mitzvahs at Bondi Pavilion. It was, I've walked over that bridge hundreds of times where you see the shooters sort of taking aim from. I used to, the restaurants there. I mean, everything there. It's like a real center both of Jewish life, but also just generally it's an iconic part of Australia. And I think what has been so difficult about the past 2 days is both sort of just the sheer horror of, a 10-year-old child being murdered whilst at a Hanukkah by the Sea celebration. And, obviously everyone who's been killed, but then also just having been in this work for a long time, knowing what the right are going to want to make for this moment. And I think it was within 12 hours that Bret Stephens had written that horrendous piece in the New York Times. I saw the sort of factory of social media and sort of pro-Israel or right-wing grifters online trying to sort of say this is what happens when you let Palestine solidarity marches across the Harbour Bridge. I mean, it really was quite disgusting and obscene, the swiftness of it in that moment. And so I think it's also felt it's been difficult to take moments to really comprehend and understand what's actually happened, and that's also been very difficult as well.
Yeah, it's been devastating because I feel like this sadness and then the anger. Like I didn't post this, but I felt I feel the need to be like chas v'chalil, like God forbid,
Yeah,
like anything happens to me. But if something happens to me, like please don't use it as an excuse to be racist, or like,
totally,
yeah,
totally.
please at least like
Yeah.
have the decency to like wait for Shiva to be over before you start being like, here's why this massacre proves everything I've been saying, and I'm going to use it as an opportunity to promote my agenda. It's just, oh, it's so brutal.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think it's also I don't know if it's just our brains being warped by social media and online, but the callousness of that has been really stark, and um I think obviously I mean this is obviously we have seen so much death and violence this past 2 years and before, but I think particularly this past 2 years during the genocide in Gaza, and um I wonder if we've just sort of become kind of immune to the sort of horror of these kinds of moments, and everything is a political strategy, or everything's a political moment, or everything's like a take, or everything's sort of like you have to have like you want to have the most viral post, and I'm not, and I, we're all in this game. We're all trying to push or promote our positioning, and believe we're doing this for a greater good or for a just and right world. But it does feel a little bit like, wow, the fact that so many people are really consuming the world through um being terminally online is just quite shocking. And I think, like, I was also quite disturbed by a lot of the posts sharing also about one of the rabbis who was murdered, who obviously, or not even obviously, sorry, I shouldn't say obviously, who had pretty abhorrent political views when it comes to Israel, but that was sort of being shared as some kind of justification, or that he was fair game, or that meant we should not have empathy and compassion for what happened. And I feel like that is also really disturbing, because it shows such a fundamental misunderstanding of political power, as if and an overfocus on like the individual political views of people who were there is such an, and like, for me that's not a progressive position. All life is sacred, and that you have to believe in human rights and life for um people, even if you don't like them. And yeah, it just felt really shocking, and a real misunderstanding of power, and a distraction. And ultimately really just serves actually this right-wing narrative, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That I keep thinking to like, what's helpful? What, like, this is such an
Mm,
objectively horrible moment. So I think, whereas, yeah, we've been watching massacres on our phones for the past 2 years. And, I think that's why, like, the story of heroism of
mm,
Ahmed Ahmed, like, obviously that doesn't
mhm.
negate the horror, but like, it there's a, yeah, there's a sense of gratitude for at least having like yeah, proof that there's of one hero in the moment.
Yeah, I think, I mean, and yeah, for those who don't know, Ahmed Al-Ampan was courageously tackled one of the shooters at a huge risk to his own life, and he was shot twice by the other shooter, and he is alive and in hospital and recovering, but it was caught on video, and it's a real moment of pause for the bravery that takes. And I think also, he's a Muslim man. He originally came from Syria and moved to Australia in 2006. I think also just deeply moving about, in this time day and age where people, or the powers that be, are so often trying to pit Muslim and Jewish people together, to sort of just see a very clear, not only, someone really stepping in to challenge or risk their own lives to save others, but also, in this moment where actually this was a Muslim man stepping in to save Jewish lives, I think is moving and profound. But he wasn't the only person. You also had the stories of lifesavers from the neighboring beach in Bronte running over with emergency supplies, people gathering others into their cars or their homes to try and keep them safe. Um, there is a number of different stories like this, and I really think actually it's interesting. Like, I really, Australia is also a very complicated place to grow up. It's a very, there's a lot of deep-seated racism, um, and also, complicated relationships around class and race and gender and all these things. But I do think there has been something quite moving for me, seeing sort of the wider Australian community and the wider Sydney community, like lining up around the block to give blood, and really standing with the community, has felt, it's felt very humbling and actually reassuring in many ways. Maybe this is actually a time where, we won't see this sort of the machine of sort of political right of the political right to really get as much traction as it might if this had happened somewhere else. So that's something I'm really thinking about and holding on to at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to hear more about growing up in Australia. I'm Canadian, so I always
Yes.
thought of Australians as like our hotter cousins. They're just like our beach. Yeah, a
This
beach.
is also why I've never visited Canada, because I'm like, this is just Australia but cold. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I grew up very lucky. It's a really beautiful, that part of the eastern suburbs is a very privileged and beautiful place to grow up. And I think, I think it's interesting at this time because I was very lucky as a kid, because Hanukkah's always in the summer in Australia. It's always very warm, and
And
we
the
used to
summer
have when
is
I was
December, right? So like Hanukkah's the
December. Yeah, yeah,
summer.
yeah. So it's
This is a
Hanukkah's always
Hanukkah pop.
in just yeah, yeah. It's like a Hanukkah. It's where we're recording during Hanukkah, and when I was a kid, we used to have these Hanukkah parties at home, where we'd have like pool parties. Like it was like a sort of as if it was kind of like I feel like the equivalent must be like something like a 4th of July weekend.
Wow,
Like we'd have,
yeah.
yeah. So like we'd have like all the kids would bring their Hanukkahs and we'd light all the candles together. And then my mum and the other parents would like serve us all latkes. And then we'd like, swim and hang out, and it would be all the kids from like primary school. It was just like I've been thinking about it, and it gets me very emotional because I think it was this just beautiful place. And I think that's the thing, um, obviously right now it's incredibly difficult, but actually, like, I was so lucky to grow up in Australia as a Jewish person. I really did feel incredibly safe and integrated into the wider Australian community. And like, and look, a lot of that also comes from the fact that I'm a white Ashkenazi Jew, and Australia does have a huge amount of racism and problems, and there's a lot of issues around integrate, like in terms of like the ways in which whiteness dominates society and creates a lot of racism, obviously, particularly against, I think, like Muslim communities and Arab communities in Australia. And I don't know. I think, but I think I hold on to that because it really gave me, as a Jewish person, I really felt like the stories that I got from my family. I can get into this whole stuff at another time, but I think in terms of what it meant to be part of a society that was just and right was to like really be committed to social justice and making it like our societies better. And I really think I got that from my family and parts of my community as well. And so I think again, like this feels very shocking because I think it's really shattering. Um, Also because it was so random, But in terms of like, those kinds of attacks, you don't expect someone to go, especially in Australia where there aren't really guns. Like you don't really expect people to go down to Bondi Beach and shoot people. Like it's almost unfathomable how horrendous it is that we're really in this time. Um, but yeah, I think I spent, I used to go, we all used to go drinking down on Bondi Beach when we were younger, and like, well, I did a few times. Actually, wasn't that cool, so I wasn't doing it as often as I would have liked. But in theory, and like the McDonald's there is quite like famous because it's the only one that in like the eastern suburbs. A lot of people used to go. We used to go there a lot at the time, and like I just think it was just like I was very lucky and very grateful, I think, to grow up somewhere that felt quite, also relaxed as well. So yeah,
Yeah, Hanukkah as a summer holiday is
it actually works really well, I must say, as a holiday in the summer. It's a good one.
yeah, like instead of fireworks, you got the candles. This is so corny,
Yeah.
but I'm like, got those sufganiyot on the Barbie.
No, we don't do that.
Yeah, because on
Yeah,
the
we don't
Barbie.
really say Barbie either. Unfortunately, I know that'd be disappointing for your listeners, but no, we
Yeah.
don't really. But yeah, no, it was very nice. It was very, and it's also like I think. I'm sorry, I live in London now, and the Christian hegemony and the sort of Christmas hegemony is like so intense. Like it's just everywhere all the time, and
Yeah, Love
in Australia it was
Actually.
kind of a little. Yeah, exactly. It's literally that. Like, um, with less like misogynist storylines, but and in Australia, like it's like even that time of year is much more chill because a lot of people are away, and it's like it's just like much more relaxed, and like we used to go to the beach on Christmas Day because that was just like something to do. You watch cricket on Boxing Day. Like it was very charmed, and not everyone has that experience, obviously, growing up there. But I feel I do, and I have a lot of fondness for being a child and growing up there. I think particularly also compared to how the UK has been for the last few years. But yeah, it's I think that's also all the more shocking. Like, I think that's part of it. But I've been like weirdly impressed by. I have like sort of political differences with the current Labour government, but I've been very impressed by the way also that Anthony Albanese has shown up in this time, and I think there's been a lot of criticism leveled at him or attempts to criticize him and connect these attacks in some ways to Australia's decision to recognize a Palestinian state. Again, as when we talk about this propaganda or this attack machine, that's what we're talking about. But I think I think that's a completely, first of all, a ridiculous thing to say. But I actually think a lot of the criticism is, for now, pretty unfounded. And I've been really admiring of the way he's showed up. So that's also been something.
That's a relief. And that he publicly and definitively challenged Netanyahu's insistence that that's why it happened. And then also I saw he was at Ahmed Al-Ahmed's bedside, right? Was that him?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, him and the premier. I think you have it the same as Canada, right? Like him premiers.
Exactly. Yeah, premier.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Because we're all just old settler colonies.
Yeah.
Or current settler colonies. Actually.
Yeah. Now you're in the metropole. You're at the.
And now I'm in the metropole.
The motherland.
Yeah, I escaped. Yeah. For my sins. Yeah. But yeah, and he did, and I think, and this guy, it's pretty amazing, and there's also been sort of fundraisers set up for the families, the families of the victims of those who were killed. So maybe there's something we could link to in the show notes or something.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please send me.
But it's an interesting time. You probably have this too, I imagine, around when you're like, I mean, I don't know when you left Canada, but I haven't lived in Australia. Or when did you leave? Yeah,
in 2011. Yeah, I moved to America with a BlackBerry. Like, that's how long I've been here. Like, Obama's
That's
America.
when I moved to London.
Yeah, a big.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. How old were you when you moved?
17. So initially for college and then stuck around.
Yes, that's me too. Oh my goodness. That's weird.
Yeah, truly. Like, yeah. Similar journeys. Did you study like history or Middle East politics? Did you go to the UK to study, or knowing you were going to get into this work?
Yeah, I mean, I moved to London because I actually spent a year in Israel, obviously. And then when I was in Israel, I met a boy who was British, and I decided that we were obviously going to get married. So I needed to move to London. We did not get married, but we did stay together for a long time, so that's okay. But yeah, I moved to London, but I was always a bit of an Anglophile. I just thought that if I moved to the UK, my life would be like Skins. Did you ever watch Skins?
Oh my God, I watch it also.
Yeah, so I just watched a lot of Skins and a lot of Never Mind the Buzzcocks on YouTube, and was like, well, maybe if I live in the UK, I won't be like a nerdy debater from one of 7 Jews in her high school or something. And so that's why I moved to the UK, or why I wanted to move to the UK. And obviously my life is not like Skins, very sadly, although possibly a good thing.
Yeah,
in the long term.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, Skins was scary. I'm like, Effie, you were like 13 years old. Don't go to the rave.
I know. Now I'm like, oh my God. But at the time I was like, that's cool,
Yeah, I joke, like, I moved to New York City because I was radicalized by Nora Ephron. Like, Nora Ephron pilled at a young age. So, yeah, Oliver Shalom, Rob Reiner. It's because of him that I live in New York City.
That's amazing. But yeah, I think there is something around, like, you might have this too, around when you leave a country or you leave and then you do have this, you're also kind of frozen in time in terms of maybe some of your references. Like, I feel like I don't know the new comedians or the new bands anymore that are coming out of Australia. There's a big music scene in Australia, and I don't, like, all of my references are like 2010 and before. But yeah, I think it's an interesting thing also watching, like, there's people that I still have on Facebook, have on Instagram, whatever, who I haven't really seen for like 15, well, not 15 years, but like a long time. And it's when your politics has moved and theirs hasn't. I think that's just like quite an interesting also something maybe you have that too, where it's just like, oh,
Absolutely. I feel like everyone should like live outside the community they grow up in, at least for a bit, so they know that like their
yeah,
politics that like came to them on their own and not just by default. Like what I don't want to like give ammunition to the bad takes, but there have been some horrifying ones, including from the pop star Pink, which is such a bummer. Like
she's
Pink,
like huge in Australia. I don't know how much you
really?
know about this, but she's got like yeah, she sells out like 14 shows in one city. She's like massive. Like that's probably why I didn't know that. So I'd love to hear what the take was, but yeah, she's just really big in Australia.
So then I
I think
hope
it's kind of
people,
weird.
right? Like, I hope people don't
Yeah.
see. She shared a post that said, "Today is a good day to let your Jewish friends know you see them and their lived experience and love them more than you love social media propaganda and tokenized anti-Zionist voices." It's like right off the back, like Pink from like "So What? I Am a Rock Star" fame, like is trying to divide the Jewish community between propaganda and tokenized voices. So, first of all, no, Pink, it was not a good day by any means. And
No.
and second, like what is your lived experience? So if Pink here is saying listen to the lived experiences of people instead of tokenized anti-Zionist voices, okay, what is your lived experience organizing and working in a multiracial, multi-ethnic society?
Wow. Gosh, I'm still stuck on Pink.
I
I mean,
know,
I'm
eh?
actually,
I
I don't
felt
know. She
betrayed.
really, but she does kind of code these days as like, she codes a bit Karen, right? She
Yes,
does a little
absolutely.
bit. Like, you know what I mean? I think,
Like
she strikes me
Deborah,
as,
she has the same algorithm as Deborah Messing. Like they might be around the
yeah.
same age.
But also kind of like, honestly, like a little bit like J.K. Rowling too. Like I feel like there's a bit of like a, you know what I mean? I feel like there's probably some Venn diagram around sort of the Pink and the
Yeah,
sort of like
like it's the kids who
feminist
are
transphobes,
wrong.
the TERFs. Yeah, exactly. God, I hope I don't get sued by Pink.
Although
But
this is all
she
for
does,
educational purposes
of
only.
course, all very educated and very much just my opinion. Very
Yeah,
much just a thought that's come out of my
exactly.
brain.
And Pink, you said listen to Jews' lived experiences, and we are Jews
Yes,
with lived
exactly. And my
experiences.
experiences, you might be a TERF.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, look, I think in terms of, well, I didn't do this work in it. I mean, I think like there has been some really, and maybe you should talk to them, like the Jewish Council of Australia. It was this relatively new organization that got set up after October 7th to really show an alternative Jewish voice and one that sort of really recognizes the importance of, um, fighting anti-Semitism alongside broader anti-racism and challenging the ways in which Jewish fear is weaponized in service of anti-Palestinian politics. And they're really amazing. And I think that they're doing such important work. And I think particularly, as we say, and I'm sure you've had this too, of like, not really even having a moment when these horrors happen and having to like not only confront what has happened and comprehend what has happened, but then have to immediately go out there and start talking and challenging and doing press and I think having the capacity to do that shows both a deep level of like compassion and care and understanding of the weight of this work, but also it's really, I think it's, really they really are trying to build a better multiracial Australia. So that's really important. I think in terms of my experience, I grew up in a very Zionist Jewish community. I'm sure it's very similar in Canada. Australia had took in the highest number of Holocaust survivors per capita after Israel. So it was a really, my grandparents, one side of my family, my grandparents are Holocaust survivors. Um, and I think, the challenge as many of us had was that it felt like the values and the politics that I was getting in my synagogue or at home or in other parts of my youth movement, the way that we would talk about or think about Israel was just not matched to the way of these sort of broader shared values. And I think that because I left, and perhaps you had this experience too, because I left, I was able, I think, to think more critically about some of the lessons and things I was told. And it also made me, it allowed me to more quickly realize that gap. Just because
Absolutely.
I wasn't able to like, I wasn't going, maybe I wasn't going to like hang out with the kids I was on Shnat in Israel, or gap year in Israel with every other weekend, or, I didn't feel that. I also didn't feel the pressure that I think a lot of people feel, understandably, about not saying anything. Or to not say anything or challenge the status quo, because I wasn't, I think it made me able to also be braver in the UK because I wasn't worried about someone calling my mom and being like, what the fuck? Oh, sorry, can I swear?
My gosh, please do. And I've
Okay.
had similar experiences. People literally like
Right.
going up to my parents at What a Bagel and they're like, we saw Orli's criticizing Netanyahu. And shout out to my mom for saying good.
Great. That's amazing.
But
I
like,
mean, I think my mom would say good too, to be
yeah.
fair.
But the
yeah.
snitch culture, like in the
The snitch
community I grew up
culture.
in, like
It's wild.
people's dads are messaging me and I'm like, if like I went to high school with your kid, you should not be sliding into my DMs like at all, let alone to yell at me. But
Well,
yes.
it was just funny. Well, someone commented on my 972 post and they called me Emily in the comments. And I was like, oh, this is because we went to high school together.
That's so funny. You're like,
go by Emily anymore.
Haven't been Emily since 2011. Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you. He's a grifter now. Wow, I'm slandering people all over the place today. Sorry. But yeah, I think yeah, but I think it makes you braver, I think, and it also really makes you see your community in a different way. Um and I think from that, like I really felt that, and something that I've sort of really taken into my organizing and, setting up Now Mod, being involved with CJMV, doing the work I do at DA, like it's really, we really, I think, I really love being Jewish and I really value what having a Jewish life, like in terms of a Jewish culture and a community, and how important and helpful and valuable that is for being able to have the moral courage we need to face this time, and the importance of building that. And I think that that's something that I think is so crucial for the work that we do. Um, and having compassion and understanding sort of that, um, we can't just be against things, we can't, like, obviously it's very important to be against many, like, a lot of the things that we're seeing, of course, but we can't just be against things. We also have to be for things too, if we want people to move on to our side. And I think particularly, in these moments of crisis, I actually think seeing, there's two things that can happen in a moment of real violence like this. It's like people can either go further inwards and, sort of it's eat or be eaten, and, see that as like this, we are all alone and we just have to defend, and by any means possible, we just have to defend ourselves. Or you can move into a way where it's like, actually you can hold the fact that there was, the stories of Ahmed Al Ahmed. There's the stories of, these like members of the community of Bondi opening up their homes, the people, lining up to give blood. And you can see that actually you are part of something bigger. And there is a sense of solidarity and collective care, even in moments where, there is a lot of fear. Um, and I think we as organizers and people who are trying to bring people along to, or move people along to like to building a world where everyone has safety and freedom and equality and dignity in their lives, have to think about like that in this time. And I think having community and having that space to build out that courage, is really, really crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it like our fears of knowing things can get worse is not unfounded. Like we saw the last 2 years are product of what happens when you take tragedy and hunker down and yeah, adopt an us versus them mentality. Like it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's really true. And I think also, I mean, I say this in the piece as well. I think there's been a huge conversation around, or like there's a real sloganeering around this idea of safety through solidarity, which is something that I, have adopted, have talked about, have campaigned on.
Yes, tell us about it because it's a great
Yeah,
phrase. It's a great. I love alliteration.
it is a great phrase. It's it's this idea that the ways, often the stories that we are told as Jews is the way we keep each other safe, or the way we keep ourselves safe is cops and security and supporting Israel, and like leaning into this sort of existential idea that, we're never going to be safe. Everyone hates us. Everyone's targeting us. That is inevitable. And so we just have to look after ourselves and turn inward. And I think that you see that a lot in, I think, a lot of mainstream Jewish spaces and Jewish communities. institutions. And sometimes that also can manifest as a myopia or like a lack of willingness to see that other communities and groups are also struggling and also experiencing a lot of harm and hostility and violence. I think in the UK, it's not a coincidence that there was an attack on a mosque straight after this Manchester attack on Yom Kippur, which, both of which were horrific. Um, but instead of sort of seeing that as a moment of connection and a sense that maybe these things, these forces or ideas that are harming one of us is actually harming both of us, and we should be working together. It's more about sort of hunkering down and putting up this armor that sort of prevents others from actually being able to engage with us, or us being willing to engage with them. And the idea of safety through solidarity is to sort of see that actually maybe it's not the cops, and it's not necessarily hate crime legislation. It's not support for Israel that's going to keep us safe for sure. But actually, like, being able to believe in the point of view that everyone should feel safe and thrive wherever they are. And the way that we get there is by working with each other and supporting each other and throwing down for each other, frankly. Like, that is part of this. I think the thing that feels challenging at this time, in the wake of the genocide in Gaza, in the wake of Manchester and Bondi, in the wake of, I mean, I don't know how much it's getting onto the news in the US, but there have been horrific attacks on asylum seekers here in the UK, and sort of the violent rhetoric and sort of the rise of the far right, and also in Europe as well. Is that I'm not sure if safety is achievable right now. I think actually we're living in a time that is deeply unstable. We're seeing really violent political regimes and ideas just have so much ascension in the world, and so many different communities are being targeted. Trans people, as I said, migrants and asylum seekers, Jewish people, Muslim people, Palestinians. And maybe expecting safety or having that as the fundamental, this idea is maybe that's misguided right now. Maybe what we actually need to be doing is thinking about how do we support each other and protect each other and resist these, like, very, very violent political ideas that are sort of dominating our world. I think about it also in the US around, the thing that's giving me hope, or that's so beautiful to me, is this sort of neighborhood solidarity watch that is happening around the ICE raids and sort of the kidnappings and abductions that are happening. And you have, I saw this thing around people getting whistles, and it's like, if you hear 3
Yes.
whistles, like, that to me is just extraordinary and really is about showing up for each other. But we should be showing up with each other knowing that maybe we won't succeed at safety, but at least we can, be together even in this, and show collective care. Which I know is, like, quite a depressing thought, but I do think it's something we have to be reckoning with in this time.
Absolutely. And then I also think it is the best way to combat anti-Semitism is by saying,
Yeah.
like, we're all on the same team. Like, please let us help you, instead of erecting erecting more fences and walls, because it is so much easier to buy into anti-Semitic conspiracy theories when, like, we're all just hunkered down in our bunker and you don't know any Jews. Like, I think it's crucial, and you're doing the work to be out and part of these movements. So, like, no, we are allies against the Christians. No, I'm kidding. But no, we are not.
It's just my own personal war on Christmas.
Yeah,
It's like, it's just me. I'm just
exactly. No,
I
it's so
hate I
funny.
hate cinnamon. I think it's because I hate cinnamon, and I just, like, can't deal with
The
it anymore.
cinnamon industrial complex.
Yeah, the cinnamon industrial complex. It's awful. It's just, like, people keep trying to put it on my coffee, and I'm like, stop it.
And yeah, right, they put it in everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
it was funny. I had when I went to Spain 2 years ago, and their cinnamon is ham. They have ham in everything.
Yes.
So I went. It was December 2023, fresh after October 7th, and I sought out uh halal restaurants because I knew there wouldn't be ham in everything. So I kept saying,
That's
like,
smart. Actually, I hadn't thought
yeah,
about doing that.
that's
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
a pro tip for travelers. It's Jews and Muslims, we're not enemies. We need to unite against the real enemy, which is Iberian ham.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That could be the next campaign, I think.
Yeah.
That could be Nama's 2026 goals.
Yeah, safety through solidarity, and yeah, the Diaspora Alliance, the Halal Kosher Alliance.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, I think it's a real moment. It's a real moment to take stock of the f- I guess just this sense of we really are in a very dark time, and I think there's been a bit of not denial. I think we've all a lot of especially communities and organizations working around migrant justice, around racial justice, around anti-deportation or anti-racism work in general. I think have really been sounding the alarm, and you know I think there's been a reticence maybe to sort of fully. I mean, maybe not so much in the US just because it's so overt, but like I think because also in the UK we have in theory like a progressive government. Not true.
Yeah, oh,
um
wait, there.
yeah, like they're bad. Real bad. But like I think there's sort of in this sense of like, okay, maybe it's not as bad as it is, but we have the far right party Reform are polling first. Like we're getting into really dark territory. And I think also the thing about the UK is that it likes to pretend there's a lot of British exceptionalism, which probably doesn't surprise you. But like this idea that we couldn't possibly have fascism or like authoritarianism in the UK because we invented parliamentary democracy. Ha ha ha. And actually, it turns out we can, and we probably will. And like really understanding that that's the moment we're in, I think takes it's hard, but that is kind of where we are, and we need to be thinking in those terms. Much like I've seen so much of this amazing work being done in the US over the last, well, I guess I said since 2016 probably, but definitely in the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, the UK invented parliamentary democracy and also invented the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
It
We,
did, yes, yes. So
yeah.
yeah.
So,
Winning.
yeah. But so there's a role to play. Yeah, partition might not be the best thing.
I mean, but that's why it's also amazing. Like, there was a few years ago when it was like the centenary of the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, and like the Jewish community was putting on all these like sort of, oh, not all the Jewish, but like the Jewish establishment was putting on these like champagne receptions where they're like,
Wow.
"Yay, Balfour! Isn't that amazing?" And I'm just like, Balfour was like a vicious anti-Semite, like deep.
Yeah,
That's why he wanted that's why he supported Zionism, because he wanted all the Jews to leave Britain. Like, it's just wild. I mean, also obviously, clearly deeply racist against Palestinians as well. But it's just such an interesting thing, I think, here. It's like there's so many ticks to British life that also, even as a sort of an Australian Jew, I'm just like, what the fuck are you doing?
yeah, that's
Crazy.
interesting. Like, would you describe? I did stand up in London in 2022 and was struck. If I recall correctly, Seinfeld wasn't on Netflix in the UK yet, so like they didn't understand any of my Jewish references. Like
Okay,
literally.
so in Australia, oh, sorry, go. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
Oh no, please! But it's just that
I was,
literally after a show and in Edinburgh, the host came up to me. He was like, "Just so you know, like people in the UK don't know what a bris is." So then I started doing a
no, they
joke
don't.
like,
No.
"Yeah, it's a christening. You give the baby his name. There's a buffet with little tiny sandwiches because if there's one thing Jews and British people have in common, it's tiny sandwiches. So it's a christening,
Yeah.
but with more dick or technically less dick. What was the
That's a good
bit?
joke.
Oh, thank you.
That's a good joke. No, it's like, well, that just made me think about. I once went to this Jewish conference in the UK, and it was a great conference. But they provided lunch. They provided like these. It was a conference on anti-Semitism and Jews and Jewish life, whatever. And they provided these really tiny plates for lunch, like just like it was like they were like side plates to get the food. And I went up to the organizer and I was like, "This is a microaggression. Like, you can't do
Yeah.
this. Like, it's not okay. We all need big plates."
This
You can
is
see like people like piling and piling food on. They're like, what are we gonna do? But I was just gonna say in Australia when I was growing up, I mean, so that 6 p.m. on Channel 10 was The Nanny, and then 7 p.m. was Seinfeld, and Neighbours in between, which is obviously very important. I don't know if Neighbours got to Canada.
No, that
So I grew up. I didn't. Oh, it's like a soap opera. It's a very famous soap
is that
opera
the one I
in
think, yeah,
Australia.
Margot Robbie was on?
No, that's Home and Away. That's the other one.
Oh.
But Neighbours was always a favorite in our house. But so I grew up with all these like culture references from The Nanny and Seinfeld. Like watched it like every day. Probably not great as like a 7-year-old to be watching those, but that's fine.
No, it could
And
be
yeah,
good.
when I moved here, no one had watched it.
Fran Drescher is a labor icon. She was like
Yeah,
the
isn't she
head.
like a union leader?
Yeah, she was the president of SAG during the strikes. So she of all the role models, she's a good one. But yes, so much of
That
American
yeah.
pop culture, people at least know what Jews are because of our sitcoms. But the
It
vibe,
actually would be a really great episode for you to do where you like go through all the people where it's like who can we still like and who can't we like
yes,
anymore. We should just make a list. Like so we can still like Fran Drescher, no more Will and Grace.
yeah, Will
No,
and
no.
more like Will and Disgrace.
Will and just goes good.
Yeah,
Will and Disgrace. Actually wild. That's not big in the UK either. So I hadn't actually followed the Deborah Messing stuff properly because I wasn't yeah, like it's just not in the cultural zeitgeist here. But yeah, that's also cuckoo bananas. It is kind of amazing how much people have lost their minds in the last 2 years. But yeah, it's good problematic. Yeah, or problematic faves. I think you could call it that. We can go through who do we still want to like even though we know they're terrible.
Yeah, I
Larry David.
maintain exactly. I think Larry David was the real brains behind Seinfeld's. Like, because Seinfeld without Larry is B movie. Like,
Right, yeah. I think it's okay that like all our ire can be directed at Jerry Seinfeld, and
yes,
we can keep Larry, hopefully.
but how can we help? What like practical, whether it's organizations to support or plug into people we can still like. Yeah, I'd love to be able to help both. Yeah, the Jewish community in Sydney and your peace building in the epicenter of the empire.
Yeah, yeah, in the metro. Uh, yeah, look, I think in Sydney, look, I mean, it's only been 48 hours. That's the other thing.
Right.
I mean, it feels like we've been living in this reality for a long, but it's very recent. I think it's mostly there's obviously sharing. I mean there's the material support, so sort of supporting these families who've have lived through this terror and are now looking to like bury their loved ones. I think there's something around supporting that, and I think like I think the other thing is to be able to hold in this time like these multiple truths of our reality and like hold on to sort of complex thinking in times of deep distress, which is very hard. I think there's such a moment in when something as horrific and violent as this happens is that it's easy to sort of give in to the fear. And, I felt it too. Like we all feel it. We're just like, oh God, and to sort of hide or hide away or, reach for easy answers. And unfortunately there aren't, aside from obviously, this kind of violence is deplorable and completely unjustifiable in any capacity. Um, but I think it's about asking ourselves, like, what kind of world do we want to build? How do we face up to this moment and um, reach for those who we want to be in movement with and in relationship and hug them close to us and hold them close to us and understand that, through this darkness, we will find our way back both to each other, but also to building a world where, we never have to go through this kind of thing again, where no one has to go through this kind of thing again. I think that's the other thing around, never again for anyone. Like even though that's been so overused in some ways, I do think that there's such a renewed in spite of the horror of the genocide in Gaza and the sort of violence that so many different communities are feeling. There is opportunity for that collective care and for that solidarity and for like really coming together and thinking of new visions and ways to build a more just and liberated world. And I think that's what sort of gets me through. And yeah, I think that's all we can do. And I think in terms of sort of the more broader work, um, I've been thinking for a long time that we need to, like a lot of us need to go away and really sit together and think about what is the strategy here? Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to push for an end to support for Israel's apartheid and genocide? How are we going to build out Jewish communities that feel like they're based in values that we share across the board? How do we win the political fights we need to have the allies in government and parliament to make that happen and support that work? So I think there's a holding the present rapid response reactive stuff with the long term, I would really think is the sort of role of Jewish organizers and campaigners in this work over the next couple of years, actually.
Absolutely. And I feel
It's
grateful
quite a
that
boring answer, sorry.
no, it's no exactly what I need to hear. And I'm grateful that there are people from all over the world in places all over the world doing the work. And I think it's important to say, like, yeah, it's hack to, is it hack to quote Martin Luther King? But we've seen like injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Like, I think the past 2 years have seen the violence in Israel did not make Jews safer. It made us targets. It's not victim blaming to say that there's a connection between violence in Israel, Palestine, and violence against Jews when we have community leaders saying that the violence is for us, for our benefit, representing
Mhm.
our interests. So to say no, like what I'm trying to do with this podcast is to say, like, you could be categorically against the deaths of innocents. It's not hard. So I want the people.
It is not hard. It is
It's
not hard.
literally so easy. Like, I do it every day. And so being categorically against the deaths of an innocents also means, yeah, mourning people who were just at a Hanukkah by the sea. Like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Absolutely.
were like tankies and stuff saying like, well, it's Chabad, but
Oh, I
like,
think that's shocking. Like, I honestly,
yeah,
I mean, I don't know if I have a couple more minutes, but I just think actually
please, yeah.
this is what I was kind of trying to say earlier is that it's such a, um, like we don't live in a world where you just, I think this idea, like either you're like you believe people
Hmm.
deserve to live and that all human life is sacred, or you don't. And I think also, um, it's distraction. It's actually, this is what it is actually, it's a distraction because it's not thinking about power. The people at that Hanukkah event, it doesn't actually matter what they think about Israel or anything. Like that doesn't, first of all, that doesn't mean they deserve to be shot, even if they do have opinions we don't agree with, like
Absolutely.
categorically crazy. But second of all, it's like that is, I think this is where um, it's important for us to talk about power, because I think what has actually happened with the categorical moral failure of our politicians to not hold Israel accountable and treat Israel like a state actor in a geopolitical position, in a humanitarian position, and like really sort of hold Israel to account in that standard, is that the public anger at what Israel is doing doesn't go away. It just gets repackaged and targeted at people who actually don't have the power to do anything around Israel. Jewish people are not responsible, even if they might support on some level. Like don't actually have any power to stop Israel from what it's doing.
Hmm.
But that, we can be set up as targets because there is this failure to hold Israel accountable. And I think that is a really important point that we should be making to politicians right now, is that your inability or your cowardice on sort of saying Israel is doing terrible things and it should have faced the consequences that other states do, like sanctions or embargoes or boycotts or whatever, actually like really increases the likelihood that people are going to be like, oh, well, why isn't the state, why isn't like doing more? Or maybe it's because the secret Jewish power and the Jews are and like that does put a target on our backs. And, I think anyone online who is saying that like people deserve to die because of, whatever, or because it was Chabad. I mean, the other thing about Australia is just that Chabad does so much of the public, because we just have a much smaller Jewish community. So they do a lot of that work. Like, it's wild. Like, I don't even want to give that any time or energy because I just think it's so fucked, actually. And yeah, I think it's a very callous way to respond to such a horrific time, and I just don't think those people are in the movement. They're not part of the work.
No.
They're actually the problem, or one
Yeah.
of the problems.
They don't represent the movement for Palestinian rights. They don't represent anyone but the comment section on the fourth
Yeah, it's
page of
just
the YouTube search results.
just log off, mate. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Is
like, it's very like
is there an equivalent of like here it's like go touch grass? Like if people like is there a phrase that you tell people if they've just like completely lost the plot?
No, I actually think it's I don't I think it's more the meme, the Don Draper meme from Mad Men when he's in the elevator and this guy
I
the,
don't
the
think
character's
about you
like,
at
I look at
all.
you. Yeah, exactly. I think it's that. It's like no one is like, who are you? Like it's wild. But I just think it's very obviously there are some more influential people who are saying these things, which is terrible. Yeah, I think it's touch grass, I think it's log off, and I think it's just like, where's your compassion? Like where's your humanity? What makes you think that you don't actually have to always I don't know, it's like the take business, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's also just like, I also think it's anti-Semitism. Like, I do think that there's this sense that, I do hold Israel to account and for blame for this, but I think that in many ways, but I think because of what's happened in Gaza, um, I think in turn that has made people feel much less empathetic towards Jewish people around the world when we experience violence because of this failure to sort of distinguish out either like Israel as a state versus Jewish people, and like because of the ways in which some of our legacy institutions do really sort of support Israel in that way. Um, I think it's contributed to us looking like targets or looking like we don't deserve care or safety, or that we're somehow pulling the strings. And I think there's we obviously have a responsibility to confront the organizations in our communities that support these things, and also people just don't deserve to be shot on the beach as a result of that.
Exactly. Yeah, not with guns, never with guns. Like this, yeah, that's why the podcast is called War is Stupid. Because, yeah, we can have disagreements, but that's not how you voice them or challenge them.
Mm.
Oy vey. So I'm so grateful for both of your time today and your work as
Thank
part
you,
of
Orli.
the greater global movement. Like I feel grateful to be a part of something. There are leftist Jews everywhere, and for people listening to this, you can plug in and we'll have the
Thank you so
donation links.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Orli. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, and and sending so much love to you and your community.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and or watching War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. Please subscribe, rate and review. Tell your dads. We'll see you next time.